Okay, the game is Cedar Mountain. This is an S&T issue. It's kind of a funny situation for me because this is the this is the one missing issue I sort of have. I had one subscription, tried to resubscribe, and somehow I ended up without this one. I've seen this played once. And I've wanted it ever since. I mean, it was my missing issue, but I wasn't ever willing to pay a decent amount of money trying to hunt it down or anything. But now with the interwebs, well, and the fact that I have some money, I was able to pick it up. The one time I saw it played was at a club in Goshen, New York, where I used to go. Most of the people were role players. I did some role playing there. Most of them were young kids, as was I. But there were a couple of older guys, and eventually we kind of started doing more board gaming with these guys. But they always had the latest S&T out, or every other month they would, and they'd play it. Just an interesting sort of thing to see. We needed some sort of chaperones for the club, and one of them, I think, was one of the major chaperones. There was another guy who did the role playing who also was. But anyway, enough of that. I managed to pick it up, but this is my first time playing this. It's from the Great Battles of the American Civil War series. I've already covered the rules for that under Wilson's Creek, I believe. So, I've done a number of this series. In terms of the historical context for this, right now this is right after the Peninsular Campaign, which incidentally was my very first video series. I played that under, let's see if I can find it here, the 7 days here from the gamers, and 9 maps spread out all over my living room. Massive thing. The video work is even worse than usual there, but and no real review, no formal review, just kind of a playthrough there. But if you're interested, that's something to hunt down there. I don't remember which one it starts with. I think Gaines Mill would be where the first videos are for that. Anyway, this one starts with the right after the Peninsular Campaign. Jackson's been sent north to deal with a new army that Pope's created. Now, since I just did the Civil War, it's kind of Victory Games' game. Over there. It's kind of an interesting thing to reflect upon. This battle, the circumstances leading to it, would have been completely illegal in Civil War. First of all, Pope's in charge of the Union forces. He's got initially 3 people that outrank him under his command. Banks, Fremont, and I think I'm going to say McDowell. That would be disallowed in Civil War. Of course, McDowell never rises above 2 stars in that game, but you couldn't have Fremont or Banks in the same hex as Pope, or they would take command, which is kind of a disturbing factor of that game in terms of it can't represent the reality on the ground. What actually ended up happening, Fremont had already been dismissed of one command. He was dismissed of another. You could say, well, okay, but maybe Banks was a purely subordinate role. No, in this battle, Banks is the battle. He's the field commander. Pope's sitting back in his tent smoking and relaxing, quite away from the battlefield. He doesn't show up until it's over. But just to even things out, this is Stonewall Jackson, who's marched up to suppress Pope. Well, Stonewall Jackson decided to take a nap just as the battle was starting. The whole thing is a meeting engagement, and we've got these 4 victory point hexes. Let me see, there should be 4. There's 3. There's got to be a 4th one somewhere. I heard there were 4. There it is. It's in the woods there. Kind of representing the center of the terrain. You're going to get a significant amount of victory points, 2 per turn, is given to the person who holds those. You can't get them in the first turn. The Union, I've set up all in column. There aren't enough column markers to indicate everything, but they're on the march. They want to get to those victory point markers because obviously if someone sits on them all game, they're just going to win. The thing that kind of attracted me to the game from my one viewing, and the fact that I don't think I have anything on this battle otherwise, is these little cornfields here. Now lots of games have terrain, but what's cool with these is when you shoot through them, or shoot into them, you can't actually line of sight through them, you get these little cornfield down markers. And watching that happen in the one time I played it really kind of excited me. The idea of terrain that you can rip apart as you go. I don't know. The Confederates are going to be coming on piecemeal. I've got them set up on the map. They have overall a larger force, but, well, historically the Confederates probably won a tactical victory, but overall they were incapable of suppressing Pope's force. They needed really to win something more serious, otherwise Lee has to send more forces up. Lee doesn't want to do that because McClellan's currently threatening Richmond, but he gets the opportunity a little later because the Army of the Potomac is withdrawn, and that opportunity to move north ends up in Second Bull Run, which I have not covered because unfortunately that was the last game I think I played before I started videoing things. I played a couple of the battles from the 3 battles of Manassas, and you know, we're getting far enough along, maybe I will start over with those as my first foray into the Civil War Brigade series. The problem with it is neither of them really reflect, and 7 Days doesn't either for that matter, really reflect the full panoply of that game's command system, because the Army's core systems aren't completely formed. Now, for the Confederates, they're still a little cracked throughout all 3 games. The Union is only really a problem. You get to see the Union operating correctly in 7 Days. The Union's not operating correctly at all in the first Battle of Manassas. But, and I don't know how much detail I went into in the 7 Days. Anyway, enough digression. Let's kick this off, get some pieces moving near each other, and start firing. As to the rules, like I said, I covered them before. I vaguely know them, but I'm probably going to make some mistakes. No big deal. These games are pretty resilient. I also have to take some time to write up these OB charts to track casualties on, and also you track the number of victory points. And, well, like the rest of this system, the artillery crews, I've got them in off map, but once they start becoming an issue, I want to track them differently. I'm going to probably track them on paper while they're with the gun, though. What about special rules with this? Is there anything too exciting here? This is not some kind of river or anything, it's a run. It essentially looks like a stream, but the streams are even smaller. You know, really just barely in effect at all, except against artillery. Very, very few. This is a very light version of this system. But because they had 4 pages for exclusive rules, they decide to add, or the designer decides to add, a few things that had been left out of this series, probably intentionally due to complexity, that were kept in the old TSS game originally. Such as artillery overshoot. Hey, when you fire artillery, based on the range, you have to see whether or not you hit, and if the fire is inaccurate, an S, which only really which, you know, you have to be 9 hexes away for this to take effect, then it's randomly determined where that is, and I gotta find, there's gotta be a little rosette somewhere up here. And it could be any of the 6 hexes. It's not guaranteed to be overshoot. And it'll hit that hex instead. And you can't target a hex that's empty or your own troops in the hopes of overshooting. You have to aim at a legitimate target, and you could well hit your own troops this way. You only go 1 hex off, though. They specified retreat and route movement to make sure that nobody can make offensive routes. That's kind of nice. Of course, as always, specifying the BCE rules, even though they tend to be pretty much the same across the board. The leader order, and then really just how the setup is done and how you win the game, which is mainly through casualties, but very clearly, if you can collect these 2-point hexes and hold them, you will be collecting victory points when your opponent won't, assuming he doesn't, fight you for them. And the point value is not that big. The Confederates only need 11 points to get a tactical victory, and to get a strategic victory they need to push themselves to 19. Now in 13 turns, say 10 of them holding these victory point hexes, well, that's like 80 points. So very clearly they are a key factor to the battle. Otherwise, you have the normal victory points from losses, and then also from causing brigade combat ineffectiveness. Remember, when units become BCE ineffective, they really can't fight anymore, essentially. They can't move next to the enemy. They have shifts against them in firing. They have morale penalties. It really does break the unit in a way that's kind of nice to see. And, well, we'll see if we see any of that. Wow, I've said a lot of words here. I want to get a couple of turns in on this thing, at least the beginning of the meeting, so we'll do that. Well, kicking things off, I haven't actually moved anything yet. Normally I'm used to these games, the Confederates moving first for whatever reason, maybe because they're on the attack or whatever, and they are here. But, well, both sides really are. In this one, the Union's going to move first every turn, but they neglect the Union turn for the first turn. And you can see the Confederates beginning to stream onto the map. We'll continue a little bit of this meeting on this video before we get to combat. One thing about this particular game, again, a little tweak that they made, they decided dismounting cavalry and using them as dragoons, at least at this point in the war, was not really what their training was. So they penalized them by giving them reduced morale on the infantry side. I think that's a clever little move, and actually one that you could easily add to any of this series in a sense, just by this isn't like the overshoot rules where you're actually adding a rule, but there isn't a lot of additional rules to this one. All right, we'll move on to turn 2, and I gotta start writing up that OOB, but I figure I can do that during load times at work and such. Here, after 2 turns, the Union forces have crossed the river. They're able to move. They're trying to position themselves, grab at least this victory point hex. Right now, the Confederates have taken one somewhere under here. I don't know. That's worth 2 points. I'll be recording that. We've got the others, though, here, and here, that are all empty. And that's where the fighting is going to develop, is right through there, I think. Union's got to deploy its forces. They're all in column still. The Confederates have already deployed Early's brigade into place. Dark-colored guys are the divisional commanders. We'll push into the 3:30 turn. So, turn 3, the Union's been able to deploy their infantry in line. They took the first fire of the game, and some of this cav did too. I had to spend a little bit of time to look up what I knew was there, which is, in this case, the column shift in favor of shooting cav. I also have to keep in mind, this is something I'm not used to, the density adjustment chart. This is specific to this version of the game. I don't know what happens later in the chit pull third sort of incarnation of the TSS designs, but I don't remember the density adjustment being there in TSS, and that's a little new to me in a sense. But No biggie there. What we had was a pin, which is coming away during the rally phase, and just limited fire. There's another thing about this series that I forget about, which is the limited amount of fire per hex side. You're only allowed to fire 4 strength points of infantry through any given hex. I've unlimbered some guns here. Those are going to be an issue during the defensive fire for the Confederate during the Confederate turn for the Union. This particular scenario has no ammo depletion in it. The assumption was that ammo was readily available to all the troops, and there weren't even localized instances of ammunition becoming depleted, so they don't worry about the wagons and all that and just say, hey, everybody's got good supply. Now it's the Confederates' turn. Try and deploy their troops and string them out a little bit better than they've done so. Okay, and after the Confederate turn, they moved up, got some flanking fire on the Union unit up here. We saw the Union fire off some of their artillery. They get to shoot it in defensive fire, and they managed to rout this unit down here. Now it's rallied, being within range. However, the Confederates also managed to rout a Union unit, which does not rally at this point yet. Has to come later, but it did prevent them from firing up at the cav up here because they shifted early over, moved Talaferro up and into position. Now they have a numerical superiority up on the hill there. Point-wise, the Confederates still hold this space. They weren't able to grab this one. The Union has this one, and this one's uncontrolled. So nobody's going to gain any points. There's 2 points each way. This is not a game where you have to worry. It's just a differential. So I'm not going to add points. I'm just keeping track of whoever has terrain points up here, however I want to do it. We do have a few casualties, though. Let's see what we got marked. Yeah, I've got them marked here just using hash marks. That's more for brigade effectiveness, but it also will be my count of casualties. We got some casualties marked over here, like this guy's taking a hit, etc. Alright, we've seen this before in other games of this series. Really, this is just pure playthrough for me. Let's load this one up, although I did have to kind of relearn the system because there are some things. It's been a long time and I'm not really used to it. Been playing a lot of the Civil War Brigade series stuff over, I don't know what to say, not the last decade, but before that, the decade prior to that, and very few of these. But long, long ago, these guys were my go-to games for Civil War. All right, up it goes.